Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining the New York Financial Writers Association on this webinar. And very happy to have you all here, and also very happy to have our guest. And this is Paul Vigna. And maybe can you put a little more light on yourself? Sure.
I don't know if I can. I
Oh,
can do
there you go.
that. How's
Yeah, there
that?
you go. Okay. So
I can
Paul is a journalist with more than 3 decades of experience.
give myself a
He
spotlight.
he is currently the managing editor at American Banker. Before that, he was reporter and editor at the Wall Street Journal, where he covered Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies for a decade. And he also worked at Dow Jones Newswires. He's the author of 4 books, most recently, The Almightier, and we'll be talking about that today. Also, The Truth Machine, The Age of Cryptocurrency, and what made me love this guy immediately, Guts, The Anatomy of the Walking Dead. So, um, a
My,
Renaissance
my
man.
other book.
Your other book.
Yeah.
Did I miss one?
No. The Walking Dead is like three of them are about money and finance, and one isn't. One is about zombies.
Okay. So, um, the name of the book is, and I urge you to get it. I think Paul can put a link in the Q&A
Yeah, I
about
will.
where to find this. Um, take my word for it, he wrote a book. And it is called The Almightier: How Money Became God, Greed Became Virtue, and Debt Became Sin. And I thought this is a fascinating topic, and we're going to dive right into it. But I just want to share a quick anecdote, take 2 minutes. This is, Paul, is why I'm really interested in your topic and why I found your book so fascinating. Uh, Back in the 90s, I served a National Press Foundation fellowship, which basically involved spending 2 weeks at the University of Wisconsin-Madison uh, at a conference of continuing ed programs for community and farm bankers. It is an interesting topic. It's not 2 weeks of interesting, but it had its highlights. And one of the sessions was about usury. And we were talking about, just state by state and county by county, how much interest can you charge? Is it different if it's fixed or variable? Is it different if it's a line of credit versus a loan versus revolving credit? And um, just how to protect yourself legally from charges of usury is basically the topic. And um, after the material was presented, uh, some community banker raised his hand and said, but what I don't understand is why there are usury laws at all. I mean, and if you're libertarian, free market capitalist, this is a really good question. Why don't you just let the market determine how much interest is too much interest? And I um, I just said what I thought was an incontrovertible fact. I said, "Oh yeah, these just date back to the days when Christians didn't charge each other interest." And you could have heard a pin drop in that room. It like dead silence for a minute before uh, the facilitator said, "Yeah, that's exactly right." So ever since then, I've been waiting for someone to write this book, Paul, and thank you for doing it. So, tell us what you mean by the Almightier
Sure.
and how you became interested in this topic.
Well, I mean, it's very interesting in that, one thing is when I wrote the book, I wrote it very much without talking about current events or people in the news right now. It was not something that I was trying to tie in a very overt way to what's going on today. But everything in the book is concerned with what's going on today. And to your point, there is a debate right now about what is too much interest to charge on a credit card. The president, floated this proposal to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. Others in Congress have tried to do that over the years. So you have this big debate now about what is the acceptable rate to charge for that service.
Mhm.
And that is a debate, that is an argument that, as if you look at the book, you'll see it goes back not to, you know, medieval Europe and Christianity, not the beginnings of Christianity. It goes back beyond that. It goes back basically about as far as we have written records for. Money emerges in the written record in ancient Mesopotamia. It is a product of the temple. The temple uses it to keep track of the temple's possessions, the city states, different, what they have, what they own, and they distribute how to distribute it. Money helps them do all that. And very soon after they invent money, they invent loans, and then they invent compound interest. And they quickly realize, these ancient societies, that compound interest has this very persistent habit of growing and growing and growing and becoming a problem for individuals and becoming a problem for societies. It's the problem of just growing debt and people and cities and countries becoming overly indebted. And it happened again and again and again. So the debate we are having today about this is something that is thousands of years old. And that wasn't the reason I wrote the book, but digging through all that history and churning it up and finding it and trying to present it in a sort of fresh light was definitely part of the reason I wrote the book.
Right, and let's talk about the priests in the temple. One of the most fascinating assertions you make in the book is that the real reason Jesus, or Yeshua, as you call him in the book, was crucified because he messed with the Roman treasury. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Okay. So I have to do some backing up before I can get to that story of Jesus. So this is the beginning of the book's first couple of chapters. The first chapter of the book kind of presents this whole history of the ancient world and debt and money and interest. And then the second chapter talks about this specific story of this, guy from Galilee. So money emerges out of Mesopotamian temples. It's a product of the temple. These city states, you have to keep in mind a couple things. In these city states, first off, there was no separation of church and state. The church was the state. The church controlled everything. The king was very much seen as sort of the God's representative on earth. And that's where he got his authority from. So he got his authority from the temple. So everything revolved figuratively and literally around the temple. In these old city states, in the middle of the city, there'd be a giant temple, and everything literally revolves around the temple. So interest becomes an issue, loans become an issue, creditors and debtors. The whole setup we have now starts emerging 4,000, 5,000 years ago. And like I said, it is a persistent problem. And in the ancient world, they came up with a relief valve. They came up with a way to diffuse the problem. And the way it was what we today would call a jubilee.
Yeah.
It was basically blanket debt forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
A king you'd get a new king named, a king would take over another city, another state, and he would issue a declaration that wiped out all the debts. So that was a thing that existed. And the creditor class hated it. And over the course of a couple thousand years, they persistently pushed back against it. And eventually they kind of got rid of it. And that's what I talk about in chapter 1. And in chapter 2, I relate this story of, as far as I could tell, the last time in the ancient world, at least, you had a major call for a round of blanket debt relief. And the person doing that was who we today know as Jesus Christ. And I'm happy to talk more about it, but
Well,
Wherever you want me to go with that, William, you
all right.
tell
Well,
me.
I think what and this isn't where I intended to go with it, but it seems to be the direction we're heading when we're talking about debt relief, is that whenever we hear about World Bank or IMF, debt relief, we keep hearing, oh, that's communism. And they've got all kinds of words for why it's a bad thing, um, and I'm wondering, does anyone ever stop to think that, yeah, for the majority of humanity's time experimenting with money, it was just as you do. If someone got like way in over their head and can never pay you back, well, sooner or later that debt's going to get washed out, wiped out. But that we don't seem to have that mechanism anymore.
No, no, we have completely lost that mechanism. And I think and this is one of the things that I didn't plan to write about when I started researching the book because I didn't even know it
Mhm.
existed. But it turns out to be sort of a major and important factor is that credit, the system we have, which is a credit-based system, the system we have has this persistent habit of creating debts that overwhelm people and companies and countries and entire societies. And you could just see it time and time again. We constantly have these panics and crashes, and the markets, explode and collapse. And you have countries like Venezuela and Argentina that have hyperinflation, and Weimar Germany and Zimbabwe. Just example after example after example of how this system, when it becomes unbalanced, creates a lot of problems. This was not unknown in the ancient world. And in the ancient world, like I said, the solution was debt relief. But that solution got whittled away because the creditor class didn't like it, obviously, because it wiped out their advantage. They ruined their balance sheets.
Right. Getting back to,
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
so around the year 30 AD or so, another interesting thing that I didn't know when I started writing the book, but which I found out through the research, is that in the year 33 AD, there
Mhm.
was in Rome a financial crisis. There was a banking system collapse, a credit system freeze, and the entire Roman Empire had a financial calamity, really no different than what we had in 2008. At that same time, you had this guy in Galilee going around arguing for debt relief. And this is something that isn't it's in the Gospels, but it just doesn't get highlighted a lot or talked about a lot. That Jesus Christ, there's this story where he goes back to Nazareth where he was born, and he's at the temple, and they invite him to speak, and he comes up and he reads from a scroll, and the scroll is the words of the prophet Isaiah, and Isaiah is quoting Deuteronomy. And what he's talking about is in Hebrew law, in ancient Hebrew law, they had codified this idea of debt relief. They had their own version of it. So Jesus gets up, reads from a scroll, and what he says is, he says, I am declaring a year of the Lord's favor. And that is what he's talking about is a year of debt relief. And the people go crazy. They drag him out of the temple. They're going to throw him over a hill. Like no one has heard of this in hundreds of years. No one does this anymore. This was something that only the kings, on the authority of the gods, were allowed to declare. And now this, itinerant preacher, this nobody, is saying we should be doing it. And that was really one of the core, and what I argue in the book is that was a core part of his ministry. He was calling for blanket debt relief because clearly the people in Judea were suffering and the financial crisis was probably making it worse. And he was calling for that. And he eventually goes to the temple in Jerusalem and and basically forces it on them. Like I said, the temple was the center of every city. All the records were kept in the temple. The temple was basically, it was like the Federal Reserve and the Capitol and the national cathedral all rolled into one. So he goes into the temple in Jerusalem and he takes it over, throws out the money changers. Everyone knows the story, and it's only a couple lines in the Gospels. But if you think about it, it's a hugely consequential thing. He goes into the temple, he takes it over, throws out the money changers. His people pile into the temple and take it over. They take it over. And you can imagine what they did with the records. You can imagine what they did with the money. Everything probably got thrown around, destroyed. He basically destroyed the economic foundations of Jerusalem. He enacted a debt jubilee, basically. And this is one of the things I argue is one of the things I argue is that this kind of thing will happen if you don't provide debt relief. Eventually, there will be some kind of meltdown, explosion, revolt, revolution. So these things will happen if you don't have a way to deal with the debt problem.
Right.
And of course, the other thing I argue is that Jesus was not the Son of God. He was not a God at all. He was a mortal man. This is what he was demanding. And the Romans killed him for it. And because of what he was demanding, and because of the sort of implied authority of it, he got branded the King of the Jews, and the whole myth around him grew up. And what we today call Christianity, based on the idea that he was a god, is the result of that, which is not the point of the book. But I understand that that's
right. However,
something.
if I may parse one thing here, and that's that although you and me, for that matter, dispute the divinity of Jesus, it's in the book it's really on every page that you were raised Roman Catholic, that you
Yes,
have a
yes, I
great deal
was.
of respect for Jesus's teachings,
Yes,
and
I do.
and you know it just seems odd that someone with your career at the Wall Street Journal and now at the American Banker should have such a contrarian view of money and and
Yeah.
and kind of tied in with that. It One thing I've always wondered is how can people, and there's probably a billion people like this who are at once devoutly Christian and also devoutly market capitalists. And I just don't know how they square that circle, even though, like I said, they outnumber me about 1 billion to 1.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna, I will say this. I will say this. I mean, that's probably 3 other webinars we'd have to, conduct with real experts in divinity and religion. I am not. Um, I will say this. I just, all of us have been raised in a culture and an ethos that has roots that go much deeper than we really think about.
Mhm.
And in writing the book, one of the things I was trying to do was just show people where a lot of our ideas came from. I think we're not really aware of the real sort of genesis, no pun intended, the real genesis of those ideas and where they come from, about money, about the markets, about capitalism. And I really tried to be clear in the book that I'm not necessarily anti-capitalist. I'm not anti-money. I'm not anti-religion. I say in the book, like I'm selling the book to make money. Like I'm not giving the book away. I'm selling it. I'm trying to make money from it. I am part of this system too. And there's nothing wrong. The system can work, and the system does work. The problem with the system is when it becomes unbalanced. And I think we see that now in a big way. We have a grossly unbalanced system, not just here in this country, but around the world. You have a global population where it's something like, the number is something like 8 or 10 people have as much wealth as the bottom 45% of the global population,
Mhm.
or half of the global population. Half the population lives around the entire world. lives in poverty, and a very, very small group of people are living lives of greater luxury than has ever been seen in history. That is an unbalanced system. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a system that rewards people for hard work and ingenuity and writing books and things like that. It does mean that you should have a more balanced system. And I use that word balance in the book a lot. And that's my goal. You said it's funny that somebody who worked at the Journal, an American banker, has these ideas. I don't see these ideas as particularly radical. I see them as extremely pragmatic. A society that operates in balance is going to be more prosperous for everybody. It is going to allow everyone to have a better chance at building a better life and contributing something to that society. I see that all as very positive, as very good. And a capitalist economy can operate in balance. And that's what I'm trying to do with the book, is to get people to see where our system comes from, see where the warping has come from, see where the problems have cropped up over the centuries and over the millennia, and then try to put it all back into balance. And how can we do that? And that's why I wrote the book. And the biggest warping problem is that we have come to see money in religious terms. And that goes back to money's creation in those temples. And from the very beginning, having money was seen as a sign of the gods' favor. People who had money because the gods wanted them to have money. The gods controlled everything. Everything that happened because the gods wanted it. So if you had money, the gods wanted you to have money. If you didn't have money, the gods didn't want you to have money. If your city state fell into ruin and there was some calamity and it was destroyed and you lost all your wealth, the gods wanted that. If your city state was rich and powerful and had a ton of money and a ton of wealth and all the things that constituted wealth in the ancient world, the gods wanted that. That idea we have carried through with us for 5,000 years. Today, the gods are not in the gods are not the figurative or literal center of our world. I know that most people out there practice religion and believe in religions, and I understand that, but religion is not the driving force that it was 1,000 years ago. And I'll prove it very simply. If I said any of the things I said right now 1,000 years ago, I'd be burned at the stake. And it's not even a question. I said them just now, and I've said them a lot, and nobody, nothing will happen to me. Maybe some people will disagree with me. That's it. That's what I mean when I say that. Yeah, that's what I mean when I say that gods and religion are not the center of our world. They don't control the world. People who, temple officials don't control the world. The Pope is just a nice, kindly old man that people like to go visit now. 600 years ago, the Pope had armies. It has changed.
Right.
But society still has to revolve around something. It just does, for whatever reason. And what I argue in the book is that what we have replaced the idea of gods with is something that to us feels very familiar, and it's money. And we have made the pursuit of wealth the center of our universe because it's just a sort of evolution from when we still really had gods as the center of our world. And that idea, that making the pursuit of wealth the center of our world, that is the thing that is really warping our society. And I think we need to clearly see that and understand it before we can start to fix it. You see a lot of people out there. I'm sorry. Go ahead, William. I'm sorry.
Right. So it seems like the fulcrum for this transition from a divinity-based monetary system to what we now see today seems to have happened by your reckoning around 15th century in Italy. So could you tell us a little bit about I'm going to butcher these names. Poggio Branciolini, Cosimo di Medici, and Tommaso Parenticelli.
Sure.
Those are three very big players in your book, and tell us who they were.
So, yeah, and it's funny, I see John Jacobs has a comment here about Calvinism, and yes, exactly, John Jacobs. What I'm describing is Calvinism, and I talk about that in the book a lot. So we can get to that later. to your point, William, there are a couple of, I didn't label them as such in the book, but there are a couple of turning points in the book, sort of historical hinges, if you want. And one of them is Florence, Italy in the 1400s, and the gentleman that you just asked me to talk about. So in Florence, Italy in the 1400s, this is now 1,000 years after the Roman Empire had sort of split, and what was called the empire had really kind of moved out east to Constantinople. Rome had fallen. Rome, the city itself, had fallen into ruin and decay. Europe was in, they don't call it the Dark Ages anymore, but it was the Dark Ages. It had turned inward on itself, and uh, church dogma was unchanging. And like I said, popes had power, and priests and bishops had power, and usury was against the law. And you could be excommunicated for it, which meant that you were condemned to, you wouldn't get a Christian burial, you'd live in hell. It was very, going to hell was a very real thing in their mind. It was a very bad thing. So that was where Europe was in the 1400s. But in Florence, Italy, it was a different kind of society. It was a very merchant-driven society, and they did not see usury as a bad thing. They did not see being a businessman as a bad thing. They were merchants. Like, Florence was a very commercial city, and it was a very important city. Rome had fallen into ruin. Florence was a major city in Italy. And one of the people who became huge was the second of the three mentioned, Cosimo de' Medici. And most of you have probably heard of the Medici, the famous banking family. Cosimo was the most famous of the famous bankers. And starting around 1430 to 1460, Cosimo becomes incredibly powerful. He turns his family's bank into the most powerful bank in Europe. He is the personal banker of popes. He is a king in all but name. He becomes incredibly, incredibly powerful, to the point where today, most people, to the extent that anyone even thinks about it or knows about it, if you ask them where banking came from, they would probably tell you it came from the Medici, even though it didn't. Banking existed in different forms for hundreds and for thousands of years. But the modern form of banking, and indeed the modern form of business, all comes from the Medici and from Cosimo de' Medici. He was that important, that influential. But what I argue in the book is that the reason he was that important, the reason he was that powerful, the reason he was that influential is misunderstood. And to explain that, I have to talk about the first person that you mentioned, who was a Florentine thinker named Poggio Bracciolini. And don't feel bad about getting his name wrong. I had to ask a friend of mine who is an actual Florentine how to pronounce his name correctly. So Poggio is, he works for the Pope. He worked for 7 popes. He was the chief copyist in the papal curia. He would write all the Pope's correspondence, all his letters. His handwriting was so famous that it actually became standardized, and it is today called italics. The italic font is based on Poggio Bracciolini's handwriting. That's how good he was at it, which back then was a real talent. I mean, most people were illiterate. Anyhow, not to get sidetracked. So Poggio wrote a dialogue in the 1420s called, in Latin, he wrote it, called De Avaritia, on avarice. And it was styled after the ancient Greek dialogues, where you have a few people talking and taking different sides of a debate, different positions within a debate, and they kind of talk through all this. So it was a dialogue. Mm-hmm. It was 4 friends having a dinner, and they start discussing the issue of greed. Can greed be good? Is greed okay? 3 of them take the sort of standard line of the Catholic Church at the time, which is that greed is a sin. Greed is terrible. Greed is the worst sin. Actually, one of them says, like, forget the 7. Greed is the worst. Greed is it's the worst. It is abomination. It's all of them. It's saying everything. One of them, though, makes the argument that greed is not bad, that greed actually is good. And he literally says, he says, greed sometimes is beneficial, which I read that and it was funny because it's almost word for word Gordon
Gordon
Gekko's
Gekko,
greed, for
yeah.
lack of, it's almost the exact same thought 600 years ago. And he argues, he says, look, who makes Florence the city it is? The rich. Who has the money so that we can keep up the walls? Who has the money so we can hire an army? Who builds the hospitals? Who builds the monasteries? Who builds the libraries? Who makes this city actually work? The rich. We should not we should not bash the rich. We should welcome them. We should encourage them to go out and become richer and become wealthier because their wealth will be good for us. And if you were paying attention last summer when Zoran Mamdani was running for mayor and he said we shouldn't have billionaires and all the wealth apologists kind of rose up. They made the exact same arguments that Poggio was making 600 years ago. I mean, William, the exact same arguments. I wrote an essay about it on my Substack if you want to go find it. It was striking how similar they were. So what Poggio is talking about is this, what I end up calling this ethos of beneficial greed, this idea that greed is good. And this is an ethos that is floating around Florence at the time. It is embraced and adopted by Cosimo de' Medici, who uses it to great, effect. But it is also embraced by the third guy you mentioned, Tommaso. Actually, I'm going to get his name wrong too. Parentuccelli. Forget it. I'll actually go with the name that history knows him by, Pope Nicholas V,
Mhm.
who is one of the popes that Poggio works for. Pope Nicholas V embraces this ethos as well and brings it into the Catholic Church. And in 1450, he has a year of a jubilee year, not to forgive debts, but to make money for the church. And for a year, pilgrims can come to Rome and make a donation to the church and have their sins forgiven. And it makes an incredible amount of money for the church. And that starts the church on a road of, when you think about the decadent Catholic Church of the 15th century, everything that started the Protestant Reformation, it all started there. So what happens in a very short amount of time, really about 30 years in Italy, is one guy comes up with this sort of writes down for the first time this ethos that greed is good. A leading businessman adopts it and becomes super powerful, and everyone follows him. And the Pope adopts it. And look, the idea, I should say too, like the idea was that you make a lot of money and you spend it on the city, you spend it on the people, right? So Cosmo makes tons of money and he spends tons of money. He supports artists, architects, construction workers, the church. He builds monasteries, he builds libraries. This should start sounding familiar to you by now because it's what today we call the Renaissance. That was the idea behind the Renaissance, that you would make money and you would spend it. And the more you spent, the better it was. This is what God wanted, and it was more lavish. So the church becomes incredibly wealthy and spends incredible amounts of money. Cosmo becomes incredibly wealthy, spends incredible amounts of money. We today have priceless artworks all over the world that are a result of this. But this idea, it just it it so quickly becomes the dominant ethos in Europe. Within 100 years, less than 100 years, really, Europe goes from being at the time, a global backwater. Europe was a global backwater at the time. It was really the third world. China was a powerful and important global player. Um, the Arabian countries, the Muslim countries were all far more technologically advanced, far more culturally advanced. Um, the Mali Empire was a powerful empire. Like these were the powers in the world. Europe was a backwater. Within 100 years of the period of time I'm talking about and the ethos I'm talking about, Europe embracing it, Europe becomes a global power and Europe changes the entire world. And all of it is because they embraced this idea that greed is good. And I think that is really underappreciated. And that was one of the big things that I just like. Again, I didn't really know that I was going to find that when I started writing the book, but I did find it. And I think that is one of the most important takeaways from the entire book, frankly.
All right. Our time's running short, so I'm going to ask people to
Sorry.
enter in Q&A, enter questions into the Q&A tab, and I'll ask one last question and turn it over to you guys. Um, so, market capitalism, as you present it, we're going to fast forward from the 1400s to the 1700s, and you present market capitalism as something that was supposed that was predicated on its participants being steeped in moral philosophy. What happened?
How much time do we have?
None. No, no.
No.
Can you keep it to like
Yeah, look,
five
I'll keep it
minutes?
very, very quick.
Yeah.
And I talk about this in a couple of chapters, but briefly, what happens is after this ethos of beneficial greed becomes adopted in Europe, Europe becomes powerful, becomes wealthy, it becomes rich. There's an inevitable backlash, and you can see this. One of the most famous is Rousseau writes his treatise on inequality, and he really bashes, he bashes the what is today called capitalism, very thoroughly, very effectively, and the 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 response comes from a guy named Adam Smith, who writes What is the Wealth of Nations? And what Smith is doing in The Wealth of Nations is really, he's trying to show that this system is a moral system, that it is better than a system where, everyone is just a subject of the king. It is better than a system where everyone is subject of the Pope. It is a system where people have some autonomy and they have some control over their lives. And if they all are working together, they can build something bigger and better. And that is morally just. That's really important. Like, Smith wasn't just trying to mechanically explain how a system works. He was explaining that that system is moral, and it was really important. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher. He was not an
Right.
economist. The economist,
There's
that the
no such
title didn't
thing.
exist back
Yeah.
then. So at the time, there was a big concern about whether this system that the Europeans had built was moral. And over the course of, a couple of generations, 100 years or so, that thought just gets lost. Economics becomes less about, economics goes from being a moral philosophy to a soft science. And what they become concerned with is just math and equations and how is this more efficient and how can we build better, all the things that today we think of as economics. And the moral question just got lost. And I think that was a big loss for us. I think that was a big problem. And one of the things I argue is in the book is that we need to bring morality back into economics. Economics cannot just be a question of what will produce the greatest shareholder returns. What is the most efficient way? What is the most effective way? Because I'll tell you, in about 10 years, the way we're going, the most efficient, effective way for a company to run is going to be automate everything and have no workers and no employees. And what are we going to do then? We
Yeah.
need to bring morality back into economics. We need to see economics and money for what it is, which is just a way to distribute resources among the people and recalibrate and put things back into balance. So I could go on for a lot about that, but I know we want to do a Q&A. So
Right. So we've got a question from Carolyn Crapo. Did the robber barons of the Gilded Age have that Florentine ethic, and when did it disappear? I see museum wings and theaters named after the rich, but not seeing a lot of Musk libraries around.
right.
Ooh,
Yeah,
burn.
I mean, they look, it's funny. Um, they had it eventually. Rockefeller spent the end of his life trying to give his money away. Carnegie spent the rest
Carnegie.
of his
Yeah.
end of his life trying to give his money away. We have in the town I grew up in, there was a Carnegie library built by Andrew Carnegie. Um, they did have it a little bit. Carnegie, and I talk about it in the book. Carnegie wrote an essay called The Gospel of Wealth, where he makes this argument, really. He says, um, the man who dies rich dies disgraced, or something like that. I forget the exact quote. He saw it in the way I'm talking about. Like he said, the rich, we have to give all our money away. This is not ours. It was a gift from God, and we need to spend it. So they came to it eventually. But for most of their lives, those guys were ruthless, ruthless capitalists. And you see it a little bit today. There's a hospital close to me that Leon Cooperman built. He spent $10 million or something on it. It's the Cooperman Barnabas Library Hospital. He spent some money. So you see rich people today spending some money, but somewhere along the line, for the most part, that idea got lost. That idea that you are supposed to make money and you're supposed to give back really did get lost. And look, it's it's kind of understandable. It's kind of understandable. I mean, I can't sit here and really bash them. I don't know what I would do if I had $18 billion sitting in my back pocket. I don't know how good a
You wouldn't
person
be
I'd
talking to
be.
me.
Yeah. But really, like, I mean, the reason these things happen is money is very alluring. Money is power and wealth and all these great things that people want. And we're human beings. We're weak. We give into it. It happens. I get it. I really get it. I really, really in the book is not written pedantically. I do not throw stones. I do not call names. I don't call people out. I'm really trying to explain that this is a system that we are all part of and we all contribute to it. So, yes, Carolyn, that idea has gotten lost, and I really think we need to bring it back in some form or fashion, but it's not going to happen from the top down. I mean, if it happens, it's going to happen from the bottom up. That's how it has to happen.
Okay. We also have a question from Andrea Galliano, who uh,
Yeah.
mentioned earlier that he is a fluent Italian speaker and was willing to help us with
Yes.
pronunciations.
Yeah.
But he asks about, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure
What
I
do you think about
understand
effective
effective
altruism?
altruism. I'm
Yeah.
not sure I'm familiar with the concept.
I am. I am. I'm not. I think it's too cute. I'll put it to you this way. The idea of effective altruism, it's this movement where, and it's basically it's sort of like a Silicon Valley thing where they say, look, we're going to make money, we're going to get rich, and we're going to give back. But what we're going to do is we're going to come up with the most efficient, effective way to give it back. And we have programs and algorithms and things that will tell us where to spend the money the best. And I think it's kind of just a fig leaf over greed. I really do. I don't think Sam Bankman-Fried is probably the most famous effective altruist. I'm serious. I'm not kidding. He was part of this movement.
No,
So
I
you can see where
played
that's going.
SBF in Financial Follies a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
It's
What
worth
is my
looking up on
view on
YouTube.
higher taxes on the ultra wealthy?
Yeah.
I think yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. I know people don't want it, but yeah, there should be much, much higher taxes on the ultra wealthy. You could tax them and they would still be wealthy. Um, I
All right.
just don't even think it's, I mean, again, you're talking about this issue. It's just like, look, here's the thing. What is money? Money is an accounting system. Money is a way for money was invented as a way to keep track of resources as they were distributed. That's what money is supposed to be. What happened was money got caught up in this idea of religion. We came to see money as a sign of the God's favor and something to be pursued on its own. And that's what we have made it. But that's wrong. That's just wrong. That's not what money should be. The value of money should actually be nothing. Should be nothing because it is nothing. It doesn't exist. It's not real. It's not even the intrinsic value of all the money in the world. The intrinsic value of it is not equal to one orange because all the money in the world is just something that we invented, and an orange is real.
All right. So you did write
So
2 books on crypto, though. So
yes, I did.
if actual money is worthless, Um, how about,
Yeah, crypto's just an accounting system too.
yeah,
That's not money.
all
I
right.
mean, when you buy a Bitcoin, what are you buying? What are you getting? What are you actually getting? You are getting a cell in a spreadsheet. That's what you are getting. Nothing else. The actual intrinsic value of Bitcoin is zero. What is valuable about Bitcoin is the accounting ledger and the ability to transact or anywhere on the earth with anybody in a couple of minutes. Um, I have this whole theory that the price of Bitcoin is 100% inversely correlated to the degree to which people don't actually understand it.
All right.
But back to Jan's point,
I
yes, there should
hear
be
those books.
taxes. We should have much higher taxes on the ultra wealthy because that is part of bringing society back into balance. Money should not be something that is hoarded. Money should be a reward for people. You have to give people an incentive to work. I get it, and I'm totally in favor of that. But there has to be some sense of balance. And I know we're low on time, but I have to make this point because it's actually the most important point. We live in a world today where we have the resources to provide enough food, shelter, clothing, electricity, education, healthcare, everything that people need to live a normal life of real freedom. We can provide all of it for all 8 billion people. There is no resource scarcity in this world today, thanks to the technological revolution of the last 200 years. We can grow enough food for everybody. We can grow more food for everybody. All of it exists. Why is it not being distributed evenly?
That's fair.
And
Also,
the
I mean,
answer is the
yeah.
answer is because we have a warped, malformed economic system that has put the pursuit of wealth at the center of it, rather than the welfare of the everybody on this planet, which is where the center should be.
All right, but Paul, the counterpoint to that, and I'm wondering if you have a response to it, is that even someone who is poor, I mean, not like um, you Sudan, South Sudan poor, but say South Bronx poor. Uh, they've got refrigerators, they've got TVs, they've got uh, the internet, they've got all these things that Cosimo de' Medici didn't have for any price. Um, is so when we're talking about poverty, we're
Yeah,
talking
and
about
look,
poverty in relation to the richest.
there's nothing wrong with them having those things. I
Mhm.
mean, they should have those things. Everybody should have those things. Um,
Yeah, but
and
the argument
everybody,
is, well, how can you call them poor if they're already living better than a Medici did in the 1400s?
well, I mean, that's a completely relative argument.
Hmm.
Um, and those people, I mean, look, do poor people exist in America? Yes. Um, are there gradations of poverty in America and in the world? Yes. So I don't know. I mean, that's good that people who could be considered poor and still have a refrigerator. I don't know. Is that supposed to be some kind of like great thing? What I'm
No, I'm just
talking
saying it's the
about,
counter argument. Yeah,
what I'm
I'm
talking
not
about
supporting
is
it. I'm just throwing it
yeah,
out there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, do you want to argue that some gradations of poverty are better than others? Yeah, sure. What I'm saying is that most people without a doubt live their lives in some state of debt. Many people live in a state of distressed debt. Some people kill themselves over debt. And a lot of people on this planet live in absolute poverty. And there's no reason for it.
Okay. Fair enough. So, in terms of time, I'm going to have to
Yeah,
rob
yeah.
Paul to pay
Oh,
Peter
Peter
here.
McKay. Thanks,
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah. So, congrats on the book, Paul. In your
Yeah.
research, I wonder if you found any indication of how different moral religious systems might have shaped the advent of very different forms of money through history. For instance, were there any moral religious arguments being made during the creation slash end of gold or silver standards, advent of paper cash,
Well,
etc.?
yeah, I think, you see is, I mean, to agree look, you see it surprisingly in crypto a lot, right? I mean, you have all these. What you end up with is like little cults of money. And Peter, you know this, like the gold bugs are a cult of money. They're a cult of gold. The crypto people, the Bitcoin people, they're a cult of Bitcoin. All of us are cultists of the dollar, the almighty dollar. So I think the problem isn't that, the problem is that all these forms of money end up having this sort of quasi-religious background. There's this cultish, belief in them. And that's the thing. You think about it, like money works when everybody believes in it,
Mhm.
right? It works. And when people stop believing in it, that's when it stops working. So I opened the book with this story about FDR in 1933 giving a fireside chat where his first fireside chat was he explained the banking system. And he explained it because he said to them, he said, look, Americans, people, I'm your new president. This is a terrible time. We're going to get through this. You have to have faith in the system. You have to believe in the system. If you believe in it, it will work. And you think about like why should belief matter? Why should faith matter? If a dollar is a real thing, it's a real thing whether or not I believe in it. I don't know why I'm talking about oranges. I haven't had an orange today, but an orange is an orange whether or not I believe in it. But a dollar is a dollar only if people believe in it. So every system of money has this quasi-religious belief system baked into it. It has to in order for it to work. Gold, people will say, well, gold's real. Gold's, yeah, gold's real, but gold's not money. If I walked into anywhere with a discolored little rock and said, hey, give me money for this, if I went into McDonald's with a little tiny rock, a little discolored rock, and asked for a Happy Meal, they'd look at me like I was insane. Gold's only money when someone declares it money. When they melt it down, they form it into a coin, they stamp it with the image of a king or a president or somebody, and they declare legally this is money. That's when it becomes money. Money is completely a belief system. It's all religious.
Okay, so we're coming at the end of our
Yeah.
time. So
Sorry.
just no, thank you very much, Paul. Where can people buy your book?
Uh, Anywhere online, I'll answer that. But yeah, to John Jacobs' point, yeah, I mean, look, modern capitalism has enabled a rise in living standards. I'm not arguing that we should get rid of capitalism and go back to being hunter-gatherers or something like that. I'm not arguing that capitalism can't exist and be a good thing for us. What I am arguing is that there should be a much stronger moral component to capitalism. In fact, there should be a moral component. There's no moral component to it right now. It's completely amoral. And that is what creates all the problems. Morality and capitalism have got to be reintroduced to each other. You can buy the book on Amazon. What is it?
Oh, that kind of ruins the
Books.org,
whole premise of your book, though.
bookshop.org. I know, I know. If you go to my website, paulvigna.com, I have a bunch of links. What is this? Books a Million, there is bookshop.org, there's Barnes and Noble, and yes, there's Amazon. So you can get it anywhere,
Okay,
everywhere.
fantastic. All
Yeah.
right, one last question. Who's your favorite Walking Dead character?
Oh, oh my God, my favorite Walking Dead character.
Yeah,
Probably
there's a correct
Michonne.
answer. Who?
Probably Michonne. Michonne.
Michonne. Okay.
Michonne.
Yeah, I'm a
What's
Glenn.
what's the correct answer?
Glenn. But
Oh, Glenn.